Well, perhaps I should have foreseen it, but the one thing that I didn't foresee was that I would be apologizing to you for a late start. However, if we were going to have a technological glitch, much better that we had it on day one so that we can repair it and go forward efficiently, I hope. So a very good morning to all of you who are present in the room, and also to those who are following today's proceedings, either by live feed or on YouTube. This is the first of many days in the coming weeks in which I will be taking oral evidence from persons who have been, and in many instances continue to be, adversely affected by the Horizon IT system and by the decisions which were taken as a consequence of information which was generated by that system. You will see that I am flanked by my two assessors, Ms. Erica Eliasson-Norris and Mr. David Page. As you are no doubt aware, Mr. Page and I have been working together now for very many months. Ms. Eliasson-Norris is a more recent arrival, but the three of us have quickly developed good, efficient, and professional working practices. I would like to say at the outset how grateful I am that many people have taken the trouble to make signed witness statements which detail their adverse experiences. The inquiry has received such statements from well over 100 people. The making of a detailed witness statement in which very personal details about the author are disclosed is no doubt a daunting prospect. Making such a statement knowing that it will then be made public and scrutinized by many different sets of eyes, often line by line, requires courage and determination. Let me assure all those who have supplied the inquiry with signed statements that I regard the statements as an invaluable source of evidence, which will allow me to gain a comprehensive understanding of the nature and extent of the suffering and hardship endured by so many people. Those who will give oral evidence to me over the coming weeks have all made written statements. In an ideal world, every single person who had made a written witness statement would have been afforded the opportunity to give oral evidence. However, that is simply not possible if I am to have any hope of completing the work of the inquiry within the sort of timescale I have indicated previously. Accordingly, I have decided to take oral evidence from between 50 and 60 people. You will note that I have not provided you with a precise number of witnesses. That is because witness statements have been coming in right up until last week, and for all I know, may continue to be presented to the inquiry. And in these circumstances, I wish to retain a degree of flexibility. The particular circumstances of each individual affected by Horizon and the adverse consequences suffered by that individual are, of course, unique to that person. In making decisions about which of the persons who had made witness statements should be asked to give oral evidence, the inquiry's legal team and I have sought to ensure that an appropriate number of witnesses speak to themes which are common to all, or at least many, of those affected by Horizon, and that the remaining witnesses are able to provide evidence of some of the more unusual adverse impacts which have occurred. I cannot stress enough the importance of me understanding the scale and nature of the harm which has been caused to so very many individuals. Of course, much has been written and spoken about this already. However, my belief is that the written statements to which I have referred and the oral evidence which will be adduced over the coming month or so will produce a detailed and coherent body of evidence from which it will be possible for me to draw clear and considered conclusions about the scale and nature of the harm caused by information generated by Horizon and the decisions made by those who seem to have treated that information as infallible. Let me now explain how I see the next weeks unfolding. This week and next, the inquiry will be based here in London. There will be hearings every day, and many of the persons who have accepted invitations to give evidence orally will be heard. In the week commencing the 28th of February, there will be hearings in Cardiff. The following week, that is the week commencing the 7th of March, there will be hearings in Leeds. The numbers of witnesses who have elected to give evidence in Leeds and Cardiff are fewer, and so it is likely that we will hear evidence at each of those centres over 2 days. If necessary, the inquiry will return to London in the week commencing the 14th of March to hear from any witnesses whose oral evidence remains outstanding. Those of you who follow my public statements will know that I was most anxious that witnesses had a choice about whether to give evidence in person at a hearing centre or remotely, either from their own home or at some other suitable location. A majority of the witnesses have opted to give evidence at a hearing centre. However, a significant minority will give evidence remotely. I am very pleased that the inquiry has been able to accommodate the wishes of those witnesses in that way. I am sitting today in the same location as the persons who will give their oral evidence. More often than not, however, in the next 2 weeks, I will not be present here in London, but I will be visible on a screen, but sitting in my home in Wales. That way of working is, I fear, dictated by personal circumstances, but I'm satisfied that by being remote from London will not interfere in any way with my understanding of the evidence. That is a way of working with which I have become very familiar. When the inquiry moves to Cardiff, perhaps not surprisingly, I will be present. But I will also be present in Leeds, because I want everybody to know that I am prepared to go to every part of the country in order to hear what they have to say. Some of the sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses who are core participants and who have provided witness statements to the inquiry live in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I have not invited any of those persons to give oral evidence in the coming weeks. That is because it is very important that this inquiry goes to them in order to receive their oral evidence. I will issue a public statement in due course explaining arrangements for visits to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Everyone should also know that I have kept well in mind the possibility that some of those who had been adversely affected will have been very reluctant to provide witness statements or give oral evidence, and at the same time reveal their identity. For that reason, I issued a protocol explaining the circumstances in which I would consider a restriction order. To date, I have made restriction orders in respect of 12 persons who have provided witness statements to the inquiry. At least 2 of those persons are due to provide oral evidence, and whenever a witness who is the subject of a restriction order gives oral evidence, appropriate measures will be in place to conceal the identities of those individuals. Let me conclude these brief opening remarks as I began with thanks. It has been no mean feat to start these hearings on time. We would not have achieved our aim of a start to this phase of the inquiry today without the very considerable efforts of the inquiry secretariat, the inquiry's legal team, and all the lawyers and their support staff who have assisted those who have made witness statements and agreed to give oral evidence. I would like to record publicly my thanks to them all. However, I cannot emphasize too strongly what is, of course, obvious, namely that these hearings would not be taking place at all were it not for the witnesses who have agreed to give up their valuable time and publicly relive what must be very distressing memories and events. My heartfelt thanks goes out to them for all their willingness to cooperate with the inquiry and to make a very significant contribution to the inquiry's work. That's as much as I have to say in opening, and it's very likely that you won't hear me speak again today other than to say it's time for a break or something like that. I'm now going to ask Mr. Beer, Queen's Counsel, counsel to the inquiry, to make his opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Beer.
On Friday, the 23rd of April last year, the Court of Appeal Criminal Division quashed the convictions of 39 men and women who had worked for the Post Office Limited or its predecessors, which I'm going to call POL today, as sub-postmasters, sub-postmistresses, managers and counter-assistants. All of the appellants had been charged with offences of theft, fraud, false accounting, and were prosecuted by the publicly owned company, POL, on which they relied for their livelihoods. They had all been convicted of crimes allegedly committed during the period 2000 to 2012. Those who pleaded guilty or who were convicted following a trial had grim punishments imposed upon them, including, in some cases, immediate sentences of imprisonment. Lives were ruined. Families were torn apart. Families were made homeless and destitute. Reputations were destroyed, not least because the crimes of which the men and women were convicted, theft, fraud and false accounting, all involved acting dishonestly. People who were an important, respected and integral part of the local communities that they served were in some cases shunned. A number of men and women sadly died before the state publicly recognised that they were wrongly convicted. Their prosecutions were founded upon an assertion that the computerised accounting system, Horizon, which was used in branch post offices and operated by Fujitsu, was reliable when in fact it was not. What's more, the publicly owned company responsible for bringing the prosecutions, POL, knew that it was not. In what you may in due course conclude is the worst miscarriage of justice in recent British legal history. These convictions were based on failures of investigation and failures of disclosure. The Court of Appeal described these as, quote, so egregious as to make the prosecution an affront to the conscience of the court. Since then, other convictions which relied upon the integrity of Horizon have been quashed and continue to be quashed. This inquiry has been established to understand and to acknowledge what went wrong in relation to Horizon. It will build upon the findings that have already been made by the courts in particular by seeking to establish who knew what and when. It will assess whether the commitments made by Pol within the subsequent mediation settlement have been properly delivered, and assess whether the processes and information provided by Pol to postmasters are sufficient. It will examine the historic and current governance and whistleblowing controls. Along with Julian Blake, Catriona Hodge and Ruth Kennedy, I act as counsel to the inquiry. As you may know, but others may not, our role is to assist you in the conduct of your investigation. We are entirely independent and impartial and do not represent the interests of any of the core participants in the inquiry, or indeed of any other person. Also appearing today are the following representatives of core participants: Chris Jacobs, instructed by Howe & Co for a large number of sub-postmasters and mistresses, and Angela Patrick, instructed by Hudgell solicitors, also for a large number of sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses. The representatives of other core participants have been provided with a live link to these proceedings to enable them to follow them, including the legal representatives of Pol, Fujitsu, the Department of Business, Industrial Strategy, UK Government Investments, the Metropolitan Police Service, and Paula Venables, the former CEO of Pol, and the representatives of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters and the Communication Workers Union at the current hearings. In this first phase of the inquiry, we are focusing on the human impact of the adoption, implementation, operation, and continued use of the Horizon system, and the human impact of the approach taken by Pol to sub-postmasters and mistresses when the system showed shortfalls, including their suspension, the termination of their contracts, the closure of branches, proceedings for the recovery of the so-called shortfalls, bankruptcy proceedings, criminal investigations, and ultimately criminal proceedings. As you know, the inquiry has published a detailed list of issues setting out how it proposes to carry its terms of reference into effect. There are 218 issues on that list. In this phase of the inquiry, we are addressing issues 215 to 218, which read as follows. Human impact. What impact, past and present, have the failings of the Horizon IT system had upon affected SPMs, managers and assistants? What physical, psychological, emotional, financial and reputational consequences have resulted from SPMs, managers and assistants being required to make good apparent shortfalls, as shown by the Horizon IT system, alleged to be responsible for shortfalls and discrepancies, shown by the Horizon IT system, accused of committing criminal offences as a result of shortfalls and discrepancies, shown by the Horizon IT system, convicted of criminal offences as a result of shortfalls and discrepancies, shown by the Horizon IT system. But what impact, both past and present, have the failings of the Horizon IT system had upon the families of affected SPMs, managers and assistants? How have Pol, its predecessors, Fujitsu, the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, the Communication Workers Union, UK Government Investments, and the government responded to that human impact? The reason why we have commenced the hearings of the inquiry by listening to the accounts of those who were and continue to be affected by the flaws in Horizon and the flaws in Pol's approach to it is that they must be front and centre of this inquiry. Although the underlying subject matter of the inquiry is information technology, this inquiry is not and will not become a dry technical investigation into an IT project gone wrong. That is because it is an inquiry that is actually about people. It's about people whose mental and physical health has been impacted. about people whose marriages and partnerships have deteriorated or failed, about people who thought about taking their own lives, and in some cases, who took their own lives. Everyone listening to this opening should be aware that the evidence we're about to hear is the tip of a very large iceberg. But it is a representative tip. The inquiry has amassed a large volume of witnesses and other evidence from affected sub-postmasters and mistresses and their families, and has sought to bring before you and the public a range of witnesses that cover the following classes. At first, SPMs whose convictions were quashed, who had been convicted of theft following a trial and sentenced to a term of imprisonment. SPMs whose convictions were quashed, who had accepted a plea bargain in the hope of avoiding an immediate prison sentence. SPMs who were prosecuted but acquitted at either the Crown Court or the Magistrates' Court, especially those who had been offered plea deals and who had rejected them. Acquitted SPMs who were subsequently made bankrupt. SPMs who suffered shortfalls, who were dismissed but not prosecuted, especially where the shortfalls were large, i.e. £10,000 or more. SPMs who were not prosecuted but were dismissed and were made bankrupt. SPMs who were dismissed, not prosecuted, but against whom successful claims were made in civil proceedings. SPMs who are currently in a contractual relationship with Pol and who have suffered shortfalls in the recent past, i.e. since the litigation was settled. SPMs who have made a claim under the historic shortfall scheme known as the HSS. SPMs who have received compensation, either by virtue of the group litigation that I will describe in a moment, or by reason of any other scheme, i.e. the Second Sight scheme, the HSS, or a government-backed interim payment scheme. SPMs, lastly, who suffered extreme or unusual consequences, or who come from a particular ethnic or religious background. Reflecting the personal and sensitive nature of the evidence that is going to be given, and the purpose of hearing directly from those who have suffered most, only counsel to the inquiry will ask questions of the witnesses in the human impact phase of the inquiry. They will not be asked questions, less still cross-examined by the legal representatives of other core participants. In due course, we as your counsel will open the issues and the evidence going to the other 214 issues on the list of issues. That's very likely to be a much more substantial opening than this short one, explaining in great detail the operation of the Horizon system, the knowledge that Pol and others had as to the existence of errors, bugs and defects in Horizon, and the propriety of basing investigations, suspensions, terminations and prosecutions on the axiom that Horizon was reliable, and also opening the conduct of Pol and others in the criminal and civil litigation that followed. At that time, you will hear all of the core participants address not only the other 214 issues on the list, but also the central themes that we will be looking at over the next 4 weeks. They're not making opening statements at this stage of the inquiry. It's necessary, however, that I should introduce in very outline terms a short history of the key events in this dreadful tragedy, and also introduce the individuals from whom you will be hearing evidence over the next few weeks. So a short history of key events and concepts. Horizon. As you explained in your progress update of the September 2021, the inquiry has adopted as a working definition for use in this inquiry the definition that the parties used in the group litigation, to explain what they meant by the Horizon system, namely, quote, the Horizon computer system, hardware and software, communications equipment in branch, and central data centres where records of transactions made in branch were processed. Following a pilot that appears to have been run from 1996, in 2000, Pole introduced Horizon across all of its branches. It communicated initially via a telephone line. That was changed in 2010 to an online version called Horizon Online, or HNG-X. The former version is commonly referred to as Legacy Horizon. That second version was itself replaced in 2017 by a third version known as HNG-A, also an online system. Horizon was used in over 11,000 branches and processed millions of transactions on a daily basis, as it does to this day. Although Horizon is an electronic point of sale system, or EPOS system, it is much more than that. Most particularly, it is also an accounting system. In respect of its first use as an EPOS, it was utilised to conduct retail transactions, for example, buying a book of first-class stamps. In this respect, Horizon allowed the SPM to record that goods have been provided to a customer, compute the price of those goods, and allow the customer to pay the money required for all of their purchased goods using either cash or a credit or debit card. Often, as you will hear later today, a branch will be a retail outlet too, selling non-post office goods like food, drink, sweets or newspapers. If a customer wished to buy goods of those kinds and post office goods like stamps, the customer would have to settle their payment in two parts. The second way in which Horizon was used was in order to conduct and reconcile transactions undertaken by Pole with a customer on behalf of a third-party supplier of goods or services, such as a vehicle excise licence provided by the DVLA, services from a gas or electricity company, a utility company, or the DWP in respect of benefit payments. Horizon records all transactions relating to Pole activities undertaken at each branch and maintains a balance of the value of Pole cash and stock that is held at a branch. Once Horizon was installed at a branch, the SPM in charge of the branch became contractually obliged to use it for all transactions as I have described. Further, the SPM was obliged to make declarations as to the amount of cash held at a branch over a trading period. From 2005, the SPM was obliged to complete a branch trading statement at the end of a trading period. Until such a statement was completed, the branch could not roll over into a new period. Data about branch transactions relating to Pole was transmitted by Horizon and stored so that employees of Pole may use the data to review branch accounts and to check for discrepancies. Concerns about Horizon. Prior to 2005, it appears that SPMs had the facility to place disputed shortfalls into a local suspense account and to carry these losses into the next trading period. However, the SPM's use of the local suspense account was subject to the approval of their retail network manager. Moreover, it appears that this facility was withdrawn in 2005 upon the introduction of the branch trading statement. Thereafter, SPMs had no facility within Horizon to dispute the figures that it produced. They were required instead to contact the helpline. If at the end of a trading period there was a discrepancy or shortfall between the cash on hand and the figures generated by Horizon, the SPM was required to make good any shortfall, either by putting in his or her own money, known as settling in branch, or by asking for the sum to be deducted from his or her future income, known as settling centrally. Pole had a contractual right to seek recovery from SPMs for losses relating to branch accounts. The approach adopted in practice by Pole was that if Horizon showed a shortfall, however inexplicable to the SPM was required to make it good at the end of the trading period. Some SPMs did so using their own funds or borrowing to make good a loss for which they did not in fact accept responsibility. Fujitsu held audit data, known as ARQ data, which contained a complete and accurate record of all transactions and events which had occurred on the branch counter. It was therefore possible to refer to this audit data to track every transaction recorded on Horizon. In the civil proceedings which followed, it emerged that Fujitsu also had the ability to amend Horizon data in relation to a branch without the knowledge of the SPM concerned. Fujitsu recorded bugs, errors and defects in two types of document. If an SPM phoned the helpline and was referred to the section of Fujitsu which investigated such matters, a document known as a peak would be created. Those peaks would be fed into a higher level document known as a known error log, or KEL. Criminal prosecutions. From the first rollout of Horizon, and by that I mean within weeks of it first being installed, SPMs began to notice errors in the accounts generated by Horizon, errors which the SPMs attributed to the operation of Horizon. In particular, it was suggested that the system had overstated the amount of cash or stock which should be held at a particular time, thereby causing an apparent and unexplained shortfall in branch accounts. These problems were reported via the helpline the SPMs were instructed to use. Pole resisted the SPM's claims that there were faults in the system and insisted instead that SPMs made up any shortfall, and when asked, denied that other SPMs had reported the same or similar problems. In short, Pole maintained that Horizon was reliable and that it established that money was missing, i.e. that there was an actual shortfall of cash held in the branch, not merely an apparent shortfall generated by Horizon itself. Pole treated the shortfall as having been caused by dishonesty, or at best carelessness, on the part of the SPM, and demanded repayment by the SPM. Pole's stance was that it was up to an individual SPM to prove that a shortfall was not his or her responsibility. If the SPM could not do so, he or she would have to make good the shortfall. Acting as a private prosecutor, Pole commenced criminal proceedings against many SPMs for theft, fraud, and false accounting. Data available to the inquiry suggests that before the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS, took over prosecutorial functions from Pole in 2015, Pole brought a total of 844 prosecutions between 2000 and 2015 that were based entirely or in part on the evidence from Horizon. This resulted in 705 criminal convictions. Once Pole had secured a criminal conviction, it would sometimes attempt to secure a Proceeds of Crime Act order against the convicted SPM, allowing it to seize their assets and to bankrupt them. In the middle of this period, in 2009, Computer Weekly published a report referring to the problems with the Horizon system. And in the same year, two MPs reported their constituents' concerns about Horizon to the then Minister of Postal Affairs and Employment Relations, who in turn forwarded the letters to the Managing Director of Pole. The next year, Pole produced an internal report in response to the questions that had been raised. This report concluded that money recorded as missing on Horizon was due to theft in the relevant branch office, and the report recommended that no independent review be conducted of either the system or the prosecutions which had been founded upon it. However, in July 2012, Pole appointed Second Sight Support Services Limited, Second Sight, to conduct a review into problems with Horizon. Second Sight concluded that in some circumstances, Horizon could be systemically flawed from a user's perspective, and that Pole had not necessarily provided an appropriate level of support. From about March 2015 onwards, convicted SPMs began to make applications to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, the CCRC, arguing that evidence was available concerning both failings in Horizon and Pole's response to those failings, each of which was relevant to the safety of their convictions. At group litigation, proceedings were commenced in April 2016 against Pole by a group of SPMs in the High Court, alleging that Horizon changed the way that they could both account for and interrogate and investigate the numerous financial transactions that were made in the relevant branches every working day, and that the Horizon system had a large number of software coding errors, bugs, and defects. Pole disputed the entire basis of the SPM civil claim, arguing that there were large numbers of sub-postmasters who knowingly submitted false accounts under the previous system, and maintaining that Horizon worked perfectly adequately. On the 22nd of March 2017, a group litigation order was made. The trial judge, Mr. Justice Fraser, was subsequently to describe the group litigation as, quote, bitterly fought. Indeed, before the litigation was conducted, he delivered 6 written judgments on procedural and substantive issues, the 2 main judgments being numbers 3 and 6, the Common Issues Judgment and the Horizon Issues Judgment. These analysed in very considerable detail a series of contractual issues between SPMs and Pole in judgment number 3, and very many technical issues relating to Horizon in judgment number 6. These claims were settled at a mediation in December 2019, Pole accepting that it had, quote, got things wrong in its dealings with a number of postmasters, and agreeing to pay £57.75 million in damages. The group litigation claimants each received a share of some £12 million after legal fees were paid from the balance. The Court of Appeal Criminal Division. As I've said, on the 23rd of April 2021, the Criminal Division of the Court of Appeal quashed the convictions of 39 SPMs. They had all been convicted in Crown Courts in England and Wales between 2001 and 2013 for offences that were said to have been committed during the course of their work in branch offices in England and Wales. There were 2 principal grounds of appeal. Ground 1 was that the reliability of the Horizon data was essential to the prosecution, and in the light of all the evidence, including the High Court Judge, Mr. Justice Fraser's findings in judgments 3 and 6, it was not possible for the criminal trial process to have been fair. Ground 2 was that the evidence, together with Mr. Justice Fraser's findings, showed that it was an affront to the public conscience for the appellants to have faced prosecution. For its part, in those appeal proceedings, Pole accepted Mr. Justice Fraser's findings that there were about 30 bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon system, which did not operate simultaneously and which affected both legacy Horizon and Horizon Online. That there was a significant and material risk on occasions of branch accounts being affected in the way alleged by the appellants by bugs, errors and defects. That Pole had failed to disclose to SPMs and to the courts the full and accurate position in relation to the reliability of Horizon, and that in cases where the reliability of the ARQ data was essential to the prosecution, it had a duty to assess that data. It accepted that in view of the limitations on the extent to which SPMs could investigate discrepancies in Horizon, Pole had a duty to investigate to ensure that the evidence was accurate and to pursue reasonable lines of inquiry raised by SPMs. And it accepted that Fujitsu had the ability to insert, inject, edit, or delete transaction data or data in branch accounts, and had the ability to implement fixes in Horizon that had the potential to affect transaction data or data in branch accounts, and that it had the ability to rebuild branch data. Poll therefore accepted that in cases where the reliability of Horizon data was essential to the prosecution and conviction of an appellant, and where Mr. Justice Fraser's findings showed that there was an inadequate investigation and or full and accurate disclosure had not been made, the conviction could be held by the Court of Appeal to be unsafe. In such cases, Poll did not therefore resist the appeals on ground one. Poll did not, however, accept that these same failures of investigation and disclosure were sufficient to justify a finding that it was an affront to the public conscience for the appellants to face prosecution. The Court of Appeal disagreed and allowed the appeals on ground two also, holding in summary that Poll's failures of investigation and disclosure were so egregious as to make the prosecution of any of the Horizon cases an affront to the conscience of the court, saying at paragraph 137 of its judgment, quote, "By representing Horizon as reliable and refusing to countenance any suggestion to the contrary, Poll effectively sought to reverse the burden of proof. It treated what was no more than a shortfall shown by an unreliable accounting system as an incontrovertible loss, and proceeded as if it were for the accused to prove that no such loss had occurred. Denied any disclosure of material capable of undermining the prosecution case, defendants were inevitably unable to discharge that improper burden. As each prosecution proceeded to its successful conclusion, the asserted reliability of Horizon was, on the face of it, reinforced. Defendants were prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced on the basis that the Horizon data must be correct and cash must therefore be missing, when in fact there could be no confidence as to that foundation." With that very brief overview, I turn to the evidence that we're about to hear in phase one of this inquiry. The number of people directly affected is vast. They stretch far beyond those who faced criminal prosecution, those who were suspended or that had their contracts terminated, those who were pursued for lost money, those who kept balancing the accounts by pouring money that they could not afford into Poll, the 555 who brought a group action that we refer to as the Bates and Others case. This inquiry could never hope to hear all of their stories, all of their suffering, but it will provide a snapshot. You will hear, Chair, from witnesses who experienced the pilot and rollout of the Horizon IT system. Our first witness, Mr. Baljit Sethi, together with his wife Anjana Sethi, had run a post office in Kent in 1983, since 1983, using a paper ledger. They had no problems with their accounts until they were encouraged by Poll to take up and run a second post office in Essex in 2001. About a year later, now relying on Horizon, they suffered their first shortfalls of about £1,000 a week. This grew to about £17,000, and their contract was terminated. You'll hear at one stage they even experienced a surplus of £40,000, but continued to be pursued for the apparent deficit, losing their post offices and becoming insolvent. You'll hear that Mr. Sethi contemplated suicide. Other witnesses will also give evidence as to the transfer from paper-based or other accounting systems to Horizon, and they will explain how their lives were changed. That's including, but not limited to, evidence from Thomas English and Carol Edmondson. You'll hear evidence about the training and advice they received over the course of using Horizon and how they attempted to resolve disputes over shortfalls. This includes evidence from Mohammed Amir, a current SPM. Mr. Amir will tell you that he received insufficient training, which didn't give him practical instruction on the use of Horizon, that he used the helpline after experiencing a shortfall, only to see the shortfall double on carrying out the advice that he had been given. Mr. Amir suffered shortfalls in 3 different branches. This convinces him that the problem lay with Horizon and not with dishonest staff in a particular branch. He will say that the response from Pole was that the Horizon system could not make mistakes, and that he was told that as an SPM he was contractually responsible for the shortfall. Similar experiences with training, advice and dispute mechanisms will be explained in the evidence given by Scott Darlington, Linda Little, Louisa Powell, amongst others. Former SPMs will give evidence relating to their treatment by auditors and the decisions on suspension and termination. Scott Darlington will give evidence of the arrival of both the audit team and the fraud investigation team on the same day, with the investigation team carrying out an interview under caution, searching his home and querying his personal and business bank accounts. Suzanne Hazelton was questioned on her own by 2 men for 4 hours and was told by them that she could go to prison. Siobhan Sayer's newborn baby was crying whilst at her home whilst it was searched for evidence of stolen money. You'll hear from Harjinder Buttoys about 5 auditors attending his branch before he was taken and held at a police station to be interviewed. Others will give evidence of similar experiences. Many will speak about their attempts to raise concerns with Pole. Wendy Martin will give evidence of closing her post office and raising press attention until a Pole executive came to visit her branch. Jennifer Odell similarly met with that Pole executive and will give evidence as to her experience of mediation with Pole. Others will tell you about what happened when they wrote to the Pole chief executive, Paula Venables, and to their MPs and ministers. A large number of witnesses from whom you will hear faced criminal prosecution. You will hear from Josephine Hamilton today, who pleaded guilty to false accounting charges, having been told by the prosecution that more serious charges of theft would be dropped if she pleaded guilty to the false accounting charges. That's an experience shared by many who were in fear of a heavy prison sentence as the alternative. Ms. Hamilton will give evidence about her personal experiences, but will also introduce to the inquiry for the first time how she became involved in establishing the truth about Horizon, how she was involved in the first reporting in Computer Weekly, BBC Wales reporting, and the foundation of the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, JFSA. She will explain the background to the overturning of convictions in the Court of Appeal and the group litigation in the High Court. Noel Thomas, who received a sentence of 9 months imprisonment, will also give evidence about how he first learned of there being wider problems with Horizon. Other witnesses who were also sentenced to terms of imprisonment will give their accounts, such as Janine Powell, who was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment, leaving behind 2 children, Tahir Mahmood, who was sentenced to 9 months imprisonment, Parmod Kalia, who was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment. Others received community orders or suspended sentences, such as Pauline Thompson, Marjorie Williams, and Oyateo Adedeo, who together with others will give their accounts. You'll hear from Suzanne Palmer, one of a small number who were found not guilty after a jury trial, but who were still terminated, had their contracts terminated, and suffered extreme financial hardship, including bankruptcy. Indeed, bankruptcy and losing one's home is a common theme throughout the evidence you'll hear over the next few weeks. You'll hear from Lisa Brennan, who was spared prison, being sentenced to a suspended sentence, only for her and her 6-year-old daughter to lose their home and to have to rely on the Salvation Army for food and clothing. You'll hear from Rita Threffel, whose case reached the Crown Court, but the prosecution was stopped because of her ill health. She was still forced, however, into bankruptcy and became reliant on her daughter for financial support. Over the coming weeks, you will hear evidence of a wide range of personal tragedies, like Gillian Howard, who learned that she would be prosecuted on the day of her daughter's wedding. The witnesses you'll hear from come from all walks of life. An anonymous witness who was a former prison officer, Timothy Burgess, who had been in the Royal Air Force, John Dixon, who had previously worked for Rolls-Royce for 23 years. Many of them had long-standing affiliations with Pole. Damien Owen's parents ran a post office. Guy Vinyl's father ran a post office for 20 years. Brent Wybro's wife received a long service award from the post office for 20 years, and his father had been an SPM for 40 years. William Graham had actually previously been a training manager and who had trained SPMs on how to use Horizon. A common theme amongst many of these witnesses, whatever their background, is a sense of the community within which each post office existed and how the actions of Pole led to their ostracisation, to lost friendships, and to worse. Finally, there are those who did not live to see their convictions quashed, or who did not know that their names would be cleared. Karen Wilson will give evidence about her husband, Julian, who was convicted of false accounting and sadly died before his conviction was overturned by the Court of Appeal in April 2021. Marianne Holmes has provided a witness statement detailing the case of her husband, Peter Holmes, a former police officer who became an SPM and whose conviction for false accounting was also posthumously quashed in April last year. As you said, so, we'll begin hearing these stories today here in the IDRC in London. And as you said, we'll continue to hear these narratives, these accounts, these tragedies for the next 2 weeks here. We'll then travel to Leeds in the week commencing the 28th of February and to Cardiff in the week commencing the 7th of March to hear about different experiences from around this country. As you said, further human impact hearings will take place in due course in Northern Ireland and in Scotland. However, it should be borne in mind that hearing about human impact will no doubt be a theme throughout this inquiry and is not confined simply to these human impact hearings. Additionally, there are focus groups running from next month, and as you, Chair, investigate what went wrong at each stage, the inquiry is very likely to hear how these problems impacted upon, and indeed some cases, tore apart people's lives. So that's all I say in opening at the moment.
Thank you very
We're
much.
going to hear from Mr. Sethi next, but I think there's going to be a short break whilst the room is reconfigured or some technical arrangements are put in place. So can we have 10 minutes, please, sir?
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Beer. We'll depart for 10 minutes.
Chair, can I call our first witness, please? Baljit Sethi.
If you could repeat after me, please. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. You can sit down.
Thank you.
Mr. Sethi, thank you very much for coming. As it happens, we've only got about half an hour or thereabouts for lunch. But if at any time during the proceedings you feel like a break, just let me know and you'll have one. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Beer.
Mr. Sethi, good afternoon. As you know, my name's Jason Beer and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Can you give us your full name, please?
My full name is Baljit Singh Sethi.
Now, I think you made 2 witness statements, and I think they're in front of you. The first of them is dated the 11th of January 2022. Can you take that one up, please? Thank you. And then look at the last page of the statement itself. Do you see your signature there?
Yes, sir.
And when you made that statement and now, were the contents of it true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they're true and to the best of my belief.
Thank you very much. And then the second witness statement, please. That should be dated the 2nd of February 2022. Again, if you turn to the last page of that, do you see your signature?
Yes, sir.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, I think after you made your first witness statement, it was shown to your wife, Anjana Sethi, who sits alongside you. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And did she confirm the accuracy of it?
Yes, sir, she did.
And so I think you know that we've got a witness statement from Anjana Sethi confirming the accuracy of that first witness statement. Can I ask you, how old are you now?
I'm 69, sir.
And how old's your wife?
She's 67.
I think you met your wife, is this right, after you first came to the United Kingdom in 1976?
Yes, sir.
She having already arrived 10 years earlier in 66.
Yes, sir.
And do you have children?
Yes, I have 2 sons and 1 daughter.
And how old are they now?
My son is 38, another one is 34, and our daughter 25. Sorry, Your Honor.
Okay, just take a moment. We've got no rush at all, Mr. Sethi.
Yeah, okay.
And please don't apologise. Now, I think before you came to the UK in 76, you qualified in law in Bombay, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then after you arrived in the UK, you studied at college, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you worked in a variety of banks after that.
Yes, sir.
With that background in mind, can we turn to your first contact with the post office? How did it come about that you and your wife ran the first post office?
In 1983, since my wife already was running a post office with her father, she used to look after his post office. She said, this is a good investment, so let's buy a post office where we'll be our own bosses. And plus, you know, in those days, the post office used to be in the house. So she said that, look, you'll have to give up your job in the beginning because we had a small son who was only about 2 years old. So I said, okay, that's fine, and I'll run the side of the business of the post office, and she will run the post office, and we could give attention to our son also at the same time. So we purchased this post office in 1983, and we ran it for 22 years.
Okay, and where was that first post office?
The post office was
83?
in a place called Harold Park Post Office near Harold Wood, near Romford in Essex.
And I think in the answer you gave before, you said that your wife's father before that ran a post office. Where was that?
Her father ran a post office in Gillingham in Kent, and he also ran it for over 20 years. Actually, he passed away while he was on duty.
And so you said that you ran the Harold Park post office for about 20 years. So that would be about until 2002, 2003.
Yes, sir.
And was that a successful or an unsuccessful business?
No, it was a very successful post office. We never had any problems. Of course, we had 7 armed robberies, but my wife was very brave, and we didn't let them take a single penny from the post office. She put her life above everything. And today I'm sitting in front of you saying that we stole from the post office. We had ample opportunity in 7 attempts if we wanted. We could have taken as much money and we could have said, sorry. When the money was paid in, the armed robbers struck and they took all the money. But we never let them take a single penny. We got commended on many times, for which they gave us certificates and other things. But unfortunately, after all this, we got nothing to show today.
So you say in your statement that there were 7 attempted armed robberies, and they were attempts because the robbers got away with nothing.
Yes, sir. And they came with guns. It was not that they came with knives or something. They came with real guns.
And was this at the Harold Park post office?
Yes, sir.
And at the Harold Park post office, what system did you run for accounting?
We had a manual system which we ran. We had to balance at the end of the week. In the beginning, it used to be on a Wednesday, and later on it was changed to a Friday. That was, we could only balance once we closed the post office, and then we had to balance everything, the stock, the money, whatever was with us. And we never had any problem because my wife already had the experience. And then I also started learning from her so that if she's not there or if there's a problem, I can run it. So we both ran it, and we were very happy leading a good life with our only son at that time. And we were very happy, we were doing well. The community we represented, you won't believe it was like a family community because people who lived around there either had a brother or a sister or a father or mother living there. And the community loved us because we looked after them. If they had problems, they would come to my wife to discuss. She used to offer them a cup of tea or coffee, talk to them. If, say, you did not turn up on a certain day to collect your pension, she made sure she sent a message to the neighbor, could you please go and check that customer? So the community just loved us. We didn't have to worry. My children, when they were started to grow up, we never had a problem to take them to school or leave the post office. The community people said, we will take them, we will pick them up. Don't worry, Angela, we will look after your child. So we never had any problem. And we were so loved and respected by the community that we were so happy. I think it was the best time of our lives.
And at that time, you said that you were using a manual system.
Yes, sir.
So was that a paper-based ledger?
Yes, sir.
And if you noticed a discrepancy, what would you do?
We would go all over the stock again, check it. Sometimes it would take another half an hour or maybe 15 minutes because it was only me or Angela running the post office. There wasn't any outsider was running. So we knew each other, how we were working, and we had to check. And luckily, you won't believe it, for 22 years, we never had a problem with the post office. We always balanced the books.
If there was a minor discrepancy, you would iron that out, you would balance the books?
Yes, because the discrepancy would be like 2 or 3 pounds or 4 pounds. So for that, we would just put it in or whatever had to be done so that we carry on trading the next day in the morning.
Now, is it right that in about 2001, the post office approached you and asked you to take up another franchise?
Yes, we didn't want to buy because we didn't have the funds. So I said to the post office, sorry, we are not interested. And they said, no, Mr. Sethi, this is a very good post office. We can't find anybody to run it. And we don't want to close it because it's a budding post office with a lot of funds coming in, a lot of customers. So please buy it. In the end, we gave in the pressure to them, and they said, we'll help you in every possible way, except, of course, the money, which you have to arrange for yourselves. So we actually, when we bought the place, because we knew the post office was so good, we signed a 14-year lease, because we thought in 14 years we'll run this post office, and then we can settle down and retire peacefully, and we'll have a good life. So we signed a 14-year lease with the post office. And we were quite happy running the business every day to day.
Before you took over the new lease, in respect of the old post office, the one at Harold Park, Were you ever audited by the post office?
Yes, every 2 or 3 years, two auditors used to come unannounced in the morning, say around about 8:30 or 8:15. And then we used to have to put a sign telling the customers that we shall be opening a bit late because the audit is being carried out. And they would carry out the audit, try to finish it by 9 o'clock. And then once they found everything was in order, they would tell us to open the post office.
And did they find that everything was in order?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
On those audits over that 19-20-year period, were any problems ever found by the post office?
We are very lucky. I must say this in favor of the post office, that our area manager was very good. If he ever had a problem, all we needed was pick up the phone and ring him, and he would be there within few hours. So we never had any problem. We got maximum help from the post office, for which we were thankful to them.
Now, just winding forwards a little, taking things out of order, when you were subsequently investigated by the post office in respect of the second post office, do you know whether any reference was made back by them to the audits that had been conducted in the 20 years when you were using the paper-based ledgers?
No, they didn't, because they were not even interested. Because this post office in Brentwood came under Chelmsford, and the one I ran in Harold Park came under Romford. Of course, they knew the full history of us because when we took over, when we started having shortages, you won't believe it, I used to send them a fax every day because in those days, emails were not common thing. So I used to fax them, I used to ring them up, say, I've got a problem, please come and help me. And all the response I used to get is, the manager is in a meeting, he's on the telephone, he's off sick today, he's on holiday, but nobody ever bothered to come back to me, not even once. It was never audited, nothing was done during my period.
Okay, we'll come back to those in a moment. It's my fault for taking you out of order, but your recollection is when things got bad in relation to the second post office, nobody looked back at how you had run the first post office.
No, sir. They just didn't even want to know when we told them that this is what has happened with us in that post office. We had armed robberies. We never had a problem in the system. They just didn't want to know. They never even bothered responding or ever ringing us.
But you're telling the chairman that for nearly 2 decades on a paper-based system, you ran a post office with no shortfalls despite being audited unannounced regularly.
Yes, we ran it very successfully. We never had any problem. And my wife just loved the place. She loved the job. And she was very happy. And we were happy, content people.
Now, the second post office, you told us you were approached, I think, in about 2001. Was that at 99 Kings Road, Brentwood?
Yes, sir.
And do you know why they approached you to run that second post office?
Because they had seen that we had the experience, we had been running the post office in Harold Road so successfully that they contacted us because this post office was a very busy post office. We used to do about 120 special deliveries a day. So they needed people who could undertake the pressure, who could do the job properly, so that there wouldn't be a queue and people would be moaning that this post office is useless, that people can't do the job properly. So we kept the customers happy, we kept the post office happy, and because of this, the post office said, you're the ideal choice, we want you to buy this place.
Now, you took up their offer. Who was the sub-postmaster on the contract with the post office?
That time it was my wife, Mrs. Sethi, because when we had my daughter, we got Harold Park Post Office transferred on my name because she said she'll be busy with the baby. So I said, okay, I'll take over as a thing. So the post office called me for an interview, the usual things they have to do, and they transferred it to my name. And when we went to buy Kings Road, I said to them, look, now that my wife is available, I would rather have that post office on her name. And they said, oh yeah, we're fine because she's got the experience. She's actually got more experience than you. So yeah, we are quite happy even if you buy it. Because what the post office looks at is, they don't care who buys the post office, who does it. As long as the post office runs, and if there's a problem, the sub-postmaster is liable for it at the end of the day. So you could buy 10 post offices and give it to 10 different people to run it.
So the second post office, that the contract was in your wife's name, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And did you have to invest in order to take up the contract with the post office for the second post office?
Yes, sir. I had to invest very heavily. I had to pay to the person who was running the post office to buy the post office from there. I had to pay for my lease because the owner wasn't interested in selling freehold. And then when I took over, I invested a lot of money in the business also because I saw it as a very viable business. So I invested heavily in the business also, and I set up everything there. I ran newspapers and everything, confectionery, every item possible which I could sell in my business.
When you started running the 99 Kings Road post office in Brentwood, did you carry on with the Harold Park one?
Yes, my wife was running that, and I was running this because as this was away from a house, so I used to leave my house at 6 o'clock in the morning to run this post office. And I just want to highlight one point here, sir, if you would let me, please.
Of course.
I was the only man who ran the post office 7 days a week. They did not pay me on a Saturday, Sunday. I used to open the post office at 8 o'clock in the morning and shut at 8 o'clock at night. Of course, I took permission from the post office because it was such a budding business. I said, I'll work 7 days a week. And I was the only post office in the country which was running all 7 days.
When you took over the post office at 99 Kings Road, was that running a paper-based system or was it already on Horizon?
No, at that time the Horizon system was just coming in. So when I took over, there was already Horizon system there because we had to go for training. But unfortunately, the training was very weak. And I told them when they gave the training, I don't understand. I said, don't worry, when you start doing it, everything will fall into place, which never did.
How long did the training last?
It lasted for 2 days.
And did you attend it with your wife or was it just you?
No, I just went on my own and she went on her own.
And was the paper-based system back at Harold Park replaced by Horizon 2?
Yes, sir.
And can you remember when that was?
I think it all started in about 2000 or 2001.
Did there come a time when at Kings Road you started to notice shortfalls being reported on the Horizon system?
Yes, sir. After about 1.5 year, or 1 year, I don't know, I had a shortage. The first time was £1,000, and I was quite shocked. I spent about 4 hours that night. I was there till 11 o'clock, but I couldn't trace it. I thought, okay, maybe I made a mistake. I might find it next week. The following week, when I did the balance, it shot up to £2,000. I rang the post office. I sent them a fax. I said, there seems to be a problem in the Horizon system. Could somebody please come and guide us? Nobody bothered. Nobody turned up. And this shortages lasted for 17 weeks when it ran up to £17,000.
Now, I just want to examine, because you're our first witness, some of the terminology about shortfalls, discrepancies and balancing. Okay?
Yes.
Apologies for using you to do this. It's in your second statement, Mr. Sethi, and I'm working from paragraph 3.1 in your second statement.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Where we asked you the question, what do you understand by the terms shortfall and discrepancy? Yes. And you tell us that when you were a sub-postmaster, once a week you would have to balance the books. This means to review the stock held by the sub-postmaster, all the payments and receipts from that week's trading, details of which are sent to the post office. This was originally done on a Wednesday, but later undertaken on a Friday. Is that all right?
Yes, sir.
And you tell us in paragraph 3.2, a discrepancy is where you find a difference between what has been paid in and out and what has been received, or a difference between the stock held and the stock recorded as being held. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Discrepancies, you tell us in paragraph 3.3, will naturally occur in any business which is handling many cash transactions. This can be due to human error, miskeying, i.e. entering the wrong number in a cash register or computer terminal, for example. Yes?
Yes, sir.
You tell us in paragraph 3.4 what you've told us already, that previously you used a manual paper-based system which was time-consuming. However, when you went back through, having found a discrepancy, you could identify in the records the cause of the discrepancy. Yes?
Yes, sir.
You tell us in paragraph 3.6 what a shortfall is, where a sub-postmaster has been paid out more than has been received, and the numbers do not balance as they should, and there is a deficit in the accounts.
Yes, sir.
The reverse of a shortfall, you tell us in paragraph 3.7, is a surplus. That is, if you are holding more stock or cash than the accounts in fact record.
Yes, sir.
So a discrepancy is either a shortfall or a surplus.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. What did you, so when did you first discover a shortfall at King's Road?
I think it was in September I discovered it was £1,000 short.
And September, is that 2002?
2001, I think.
2001.
Yeah, because they closed it by 2002.
And how much was the system showing as a shortfall? £1,000 for that week?
£1,000 every week.
And what did you do when you noticed that first £1,000 shortfall?
Well, the weekend I called one of my family friends who was also a sub-postmaster and asked him to go through it. He went through also. He spent about 5 hours with me, but he didn't find anything. Then we surely knew that there was something wrong with the Horizon system, not with...
So I missed what you said there. Did you say he said or you said?
No, I said to him, I said, I'm sure there's a problem in the Horizon system because 2 of us have done it. You are experienced man, so am I. Now, if he can't find a fault, and then we asked the post office, please come, you have a look and find out what's wrong. But they just refused to come. They didn't even bother.
Now, who's the they in that?
Is the Chelmsford head office where we had to report everything. They were the people who were responsible, and we send them faxes. I tried to phone them, but without any luck.
And so the part of the post office you contacted was your head office in Chelmsford?
Yes, sir.
And you say in your statement that you asked them to come to the branch to inspect the terminals because you thought there was a problem with the Horizon terminals. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did they say, no, we're not coming out, or did they just not respond?
They just did not bother to respond.
You said that you sent faxes, which takes me back too. Why were you sending faxes?
Because I wanted some proof, because if I would ring them, there would be no proof that I rang them. So I sent a fax, and I kept a copy of that fax, so that tomorrow they can't turn back to me and say, oh, you never rang, when did you ring, whom did you ring, whom did you speak to? So I made sure I sent a fax, and I retained a copy in my office, which I did every week.
So you were asking the post office to come and look at the operation of their system in your branch?
Yes, sir.
And that you didn't receive any response at all?
No, sir.
I think you told us that the shortfalls didn't stay static, they grew.
Yes, yes, sir.
Up to about £17,000.
Yes, that was about 4 months.
And when they reached that level, did you receive some contact from the post office?
Yes, then we got a letter from them saying, please make this good. That make good means paying the 17,000, and at the same time, as per your contract with us, we are giving you 3 months' notice. We shall be terminating your contract.
Was that the first communication you got from the post office in relation to the shortfalls?
Yes, yes, sir.
And what did you do in response to that communication?
I wrote back to them. I said,
Another fax?
yes, I sent them another fax telling them there's a shortage. I've asked you to come and look. It's my livelihood. You should come and check it. There surely is a fault in the system, but they didn't want to listen.
So again, you identified the system as being the problem in that communication.
Yes, sir.
And just tell us, you and your experienced friend, what had led you to conclude that it was the system that was the problem?
Because I was the only one who was running the post office. It was not that I had some staff who were running so that I could have said they have taken the money or something. It was only me who was running the post office. And I had by that time nearly 20 years experience running a post office. So I knew exactly that if I could balance the books when they were done manually, why should I not balance here? I'm not taking out any money. I'm not doing anything illegal. So why is this showing that there surely has to be something wrong in the system? But at that stage, the post office didn't want to know that.
Did you eventually get a response to your communication saying it's unfair that you're terminating or proposing to terminate my contract?
No, I didn't get any response, but you know, they say whom nobody helps, God helps. After that week, after we got the letter, it started showing a surplus balance. And this went up to 38,900, where I've said about the figure.
Yes.
And I got back to the post office and I said, surely there's a problem in the system because it was showing 17,000 deficit. Now it's going up every week into surplus balance. Please come and have a look. But they still did not turn up. And on the day they came to do the audit, and I knew that there was surplus. If I wanted to be dishonest, I could have taken out the money every week.
Well, hold on. Under your contract, were you allowed to take out surpluses?
Contract does state this, but I'm not 100% sure. It does say that anything short you make good, anything surplus you withdraw. But whether it's in the contract or not, it's such a long time, I don't know. But okay. I'm sure it does say that if you're willing to take money from me, you should have the same thing to give it to me when it comes to.
But in any event, you said that you didn't think it was right.
It was not right, and we being honest, we said, no, there's no way this money belongs to us, and we are not going to withdraw this money. So we let it there. And when they came and did the audit, there were 2 officers from the post office. They did an audit, and they showed a surplus of nearly £40,000. And I said to them, what happens? And they said, we will write to you.
Just before we come on to the audit, I think before the audit, you knew that the Horizon system was showing a surplus of just shy of £40,000.
Yes.
Did you think the Horizon system was accurate in showing the surplus?
No, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the thing is, when there's a shortage where I'm telling you it is short, how can I be dishonest and tell you tomorrow because it's in my favor? Sorry, sir. No. This system is good now because it's giving me money. It doesn't work that way.
Now, you've told us that a 3-month letter proposing to terminate your contract had been sent. And did that expire, that 3-month period, on the 19th of June 2002?
Yes, sir.
And on that day, as you've just told us, did some auditors arrive?
Yes, they came that day to audit the post office because that's what is usually done when you're closing a post office. They come to audit it, and then they keep a copy, and they give you 1 copy. And 1 copy was given to us, but unfortunately in the 20 years, I don't have a copy of that. But the post office has agreed there was a surplus. They wrote to my MP, and we have a copy of a letter from my MP also.
Did you participate in the audit?
No, you can't do anything. You just stand there, and they do everything in front of you. They count the stock, they count the money, they count everything. And then they do everything, and then they tell you, this is a statement, this is what is surplus now, and you have to sign agreeing with them. And I agreed with them. I signed the document they signed, and they gave me a copy of one of the documents.
What were you signing for?
For that, whatever this statement is true. The statement with the auditor's date, is true.
And that said that there was a just shy of £40,000 surplus.
Yes, sir.
And they were terminating your contract because,
In spite of this,
in spite of that. Did that make any sense to you?
it didn't, because I said, in fact, they put up a notice, they wanted me to put a notice in my window saying that my wife is no more sub-postmistress and they're looking for a new sub-postmaster or sub-postmistress in my post office. And I refused to do that because what would the community think? They would think that these people are thieves. They've been robbing from the post office. And that's why, and it's not only that, it wasn't true. So why would I do such a thing? I refused to do it.
Did you ask the auditors what would happen to the balance?
Yes, they said the post office will write to you.
Did they?
Yes.
Did they write to you?
No, they never wrote to me. 1.5 years passed. Then I contacted my MP, and then they wrote back to my MP.
And what did they say that you owed then?
Well, they wrote back to my MP saying that when we took the computers away, now this is the post office whom we loved and we cared and we were so honest to them, is doing a audit without we present or any independent person present. And I've seen one of the statements where they wrote misbalance £41,000. How are you going to justify that misbalance? I could put tomorrow misbalance 100,000 in my favor. Will you accept that, sir? So they send me a statement and they're telling my MP, oh, Mr. Sethi was actually 55,000 short. So he still owes us 17,000 because that 38,000 is compensated against that. So then I told my MP, why are they not pursuing me or taking me to court or saying we'll send you to prison like they've done to others? And they never bothered responding then.
So they didn't pursue you for that sum and they didn't criminally prosecute or investigate you? But they terminated your contract?
Yes, but at the end of the day is this. When they don't leave you for a single penny, how would they leave me for 17,000? Am I the son-in-law of the post office?
On that note, Mr. Sethi, we'll break now, if that's a convenient moment, and come back after lunch to turn more directly to the human impact of all of this.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Beard, normally in a situation where a witness is giving sworn evidence, a judge or a chair might say something about speaking about your evidence. I'm not really disposed to do that in these circumstances because people have been talking about this for 20 years. So it seems somewhat superfluous to say that you can't speak about it for a quarter of an hour over your lunch. See you after lunch, Mr. Sethi, at 2 o'clock, all right?
Thank you, sir.
Perhaps I should say, we don't want you all to stand up when we come in and out, all right? Just sit down and we'll depart and come peacefully, all right?